This happened a few years ago, but upon discovering the sub, it reminded me of that incident and I wanted to share. The year was 2018. Me and 3 other friends, we were all males in our early 20s, decided to travel to Bali for about a week since it was cheap and we had time, so why not? Our itinerary includes sightseeing, trying local foods, mountain climbing, visiting bars at the beach, and basically just a typical vacation in Indonesia. It was honestly quite a surreal experience. The country is absolutely beautiful and the food was amazing. The only issue I had about the trip were the locals. Drugs were really prominent there, especially mushrooms. The streets were filled with druggies dying to sell us their drugs, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this. One dude even grabbed my arm because I ignored his 2-for-1 deal for a one-way trip to meet Jesus. I shrugged him off and my friends laughed it off, suggesting that I may be passing up a chance to meet our Lord and Savior. He looked rabid and frantic, like he was about to pounce onto me like a dog diagnosed with rabies. I didn't even feel afraid as we were confident that we could handle them since half of them were not even sober. However, that is only the tip of the iceberg. The horror starts when we went back to our Airbnb for the night. We had an early day the next morning and were exhausted. The place was extremely cheap and it didn't even have a proper locking mechanism for the door. It had 2 wooden doors, which swing inwards, and the only way to lock them was to wedge a wooden block through the holes mounted on the door. It was quite a primitive lock, but it gets the job done, I guess. Everything was going well until the last night of our trip, when we realized that the wooden block was missing. We looked everywhere for it, but to no avail. I just figured that one of us must have misplaced it somewhere. I know this sounds like a horrible idea now, but we settled for using a selfie stick instead since we didn't have anything that fits the holes to wedge the door closed. We turned in for the night, seemingly not expecting anything since we had already stayed there for 6 days with no issues. I woke up to strange clicking sounds in the dead of the night. I got out of my bed and I thought maybe it was one of the guys, so I nonchalantly approached the noise. My friends were all sleeping, so I decided to investigate the cause of the noise. The ruckus seemed to be coming from the door, so I headed towards them feeling extremely confused. Who could be at our doorstep at this time of the night? I noticed the doors were slightly opened and the selfie stick was horribly deformed. I peeked outside and I saw 3 people staring through the gap between the doors. They were really close to the entrance and were attempting to push the doors open. I yelled at them, questioning their intentions, as I noticed one of them was holding the wooden block. I was shocked and puzzled at the situation as I recognized one of the men. He did the overall cleaning for the Airbnb's pathways during the day, so there is no reason for him to be there at 3 a.m. The other dude asked if the wooden block belonged to us, as they allegedly found it outside of our Airbnb. I definitely smelled bullshit, as there was absolutely no reason to do that at 3 a.m. I called for my guys and the 3 men immediately ran for it. I clued in the guys on the circumstances and we stayed up until morning came in case they tried anything funny. We decided to report it to the reception about their employee, but the description I gave them were not synonymous with theirs. They told me the housekeepers they hired consisted of only females in their late 30s and 40s. This sent shivers down our spines as we came to realize that we had let a complete imposter in and out of our rooms while we were out. Luckily, nothing important was lost and we got out of the situation safely. I can't imagine what would have happened if I didn't wake up on that fateful night as the doors were close to being opened. And I was just grateful that it was our last night there. My family and I are from Australia, and back in 2007 we decided to take a month-long holiday trip to America. We traveled from LA up the west coast and then back down through Nevada. We did this by renting a car and doing the whole thing vacation road trip style. One night we were traveling towards Lompoc and stopped in Santa Barbara for the night to sleep. We drove around a while looking for a decently priced motel that wasn't too bring your own UV light, if you know what I mean. My mom and dad found a place that looked okay and went inside to inquire about the price of a room for the night, while my sister and I stayed in the car and listened to music on our iPods. We were bopping along to the Frey album that I had bought that day when my sister removed her headphones and said, "Look at Mom, what is she doing?" I look up out of the window and I can see into the reception of the motel and see my dad talking to the manager and my mom displaying very cold and odd body language. She's usually very friendly with the staff everywhere, so this was kind of odd for her. "What's wrong with her?" I said to my sister as we kept a close eye on them. My mom was standing behind my dad with her arms crossed and looking around the place as if she was on guard for something, as if her hyper-vigilant senses had just kicked in. After some time, my mom and dad get back in the car and discuss what to do about staying the night. My dad stated we wouldn't find anywhere cheaper for the night and he was hungry and ready for dinner, so we better just stay here. Plus, it was the last room available, so we would have to make a quick decision. To his dismay, my mom disagreed. "I don't like this place, I have a bad feeling," said my mom. My dad argued, getting more and more irritated that my mom couldn't explain what she didn't like about the place until my mom finally snaps and yells over my dad saying, "We are not staying here." "Fucking hell, fine," my dad says as he starts the car and backs out of the motel driveway. At this point, my sister and I are looking at each other like, what the fuck just happened? But we stay quiet as mom seems on edge. Anyway, we end up finding a place to stay that my mom approved of and bunkered down for the night. In the morning, we were all bustling around the motel room getting ready for the day when my dad turns up the TV to hear a news story about a shooting at the motel my mom didn't want to stay at. Turns out at about 15 minutes after we left, the couple walked in and booked that last room, and the man that was behind them shot them because they took the last room. We all turned to look at my mom, who was standing there wide-eyed, watching in horror. "I told you I had a bad feeling about that place," she said to my dad, who was pretending not to listen. Moral of the story is, always trust your gut, or better, your mom's gut. This story is about a bad experience I had when I went camping on the beach in the summer with my boyfriend. We had the nice idea of camping on the beach instead of going to a hotel, since I always wanted to sleep and hear the waves hitting the shore, see the night sky whenever I wanted to, and just live this experience at least once in my life. We were supposed to stay in our tent for a week. The area had public restrooms with showers and restaurants, so the matter of hygiene and hunger were not an issue. We bought all the supplies we needed for such an adventure: a 2-person tent which was blacked out, the sun rays wouldn't come in at all, an inflatable mattress, a first aid kit, lanterns for the tent, etc. The first nights were no issue. We actually enjoyed every moment of it. We would always take all of our valuables with us in backpacks in case anything bad happened to our tents: phones, chargers, wallets, etc. We were the only people that camped in that area. There were plenty of people that would camp there, either single people, couples, or even families, which includes even people that behave badly. When night came, you would occasionally hear people laughing, partying, dancing, listening to music, up to smoking weed, taking drugs, or drinking a lot of alcohol. We didn't mind it as nobody had bothered anyone for the past 4 days and nights. People were having fun as they knew best, and no one was being aggressive to that point. One night we stayed out later than usual, around 1 a.m., just wandering around the lively streets to listen to street performers, eating out and such. When we stopped at one such street performers, who seemed to have a lot of people circling him and listening to his music, we realized he wasn't the main character that people were gathered for. In the middle of the crowded streets, where cars would occasionally pass by, was a middle-aged woman dancing completely naked, clearly affected by the abuse of alcohol and/or the consumption of drugs. She was incoherent, she would randomly flirt with people, she would expose herself while dancing to the music, despite the disgust of the musician and the passerbyers. We didn't look much into it and decided to go back to our tent and just have a drink in silence while watching the stars and falling asleep to the sounds of the ocean. While drinking by ourselves, we hear some lady shouting in the distance. It's the same woman that we had seen before, but she was not alone. She had more female friends with her. They had a campsite on the same beach with us, a few tents further from us, but not far enough so that we couldn't hear them or see them, even if it was dark. They lit a fire on the beach and continued to drink, smoke, and dance around it. She, of course, is still naked, but this time she is wearing a see-through skirt. She goes in the ocean for what seems to be an eternity. I remember thinking, how is she not cold? The water must be freezing. My boyfriend just shrugged and told me not to be bothered. If we don't engage with her, then they wouldn't annoy us. So I did as told, but even so, I always felt as if I was being watched. I put my thoughts aside. We decided to go to sleep, but being a beautiful night and the air being warm, we thought of not closing the tent completely. Just zip up the mosquito cover so that the air would circulate inside the tent and have the sun shine in the morning to wake us up early. I don't recall how long I've been sleeping for, but I remember being awoken by footsteps circling our tent and a womanly voice humming a song softly. The tent was not very thick, you could hear everything outside of it. I was too afraid to look out. Heck, I was too afraid to even change my position, as to not indicate to the outsider that I noticed their presence. All I did was lay down and look outside through the mosquito cover. All of a sudden, I hear the footsteps above my head and the voice whispering, "Don't be afraid, I only want to sing you a lullaby." And the footsteps began to circle the tent. I see her feet in front of our tent just passing by, noticing the very familiar long see-through skirt blowing behind her. Next morning, we packed our tent and moved in a different area of the beach, further away as possible from that woman and her friends.